Hey guys, Danny here, hope you're all doing well. Today we are looking at a drone. This product was sent to me for review. As always, if you'd like to pick it up, you can find a link down below. Let's talk about one very obvious detail, and that's this product's really strange name, MJX. I'm not sure how you came up with the name of this product, if you were drinking at the time or you just, I don't know, thought of doing something different, but some of the names for these drones are becoming a little bit silly and almost unprofessional. I think this is a pretty bad name for this product. Anyway, let's kind of skip past that because the name of a product isn't always important. It is obviously for the marketing, but not for how it actually performs. You'll see this has quite a unique finish as well. I would describe it as kind of a retro grey look, which I do kind of like on some products. I've noticed some products are using this kind of look lately, and depending on how they're designed, I think it can work quite well, and I do like it personally. I know it won't be for everyone, but I do think it looks quite cool. So if this course is a foldable drone, which I always prefer, foldable drones are just so much more user friendly and don't really come with any major downsides. Of course, it probably makes them slightly more expensive and harder to manufacture, but I just think if you're going to get a drone and you're going to be using it just for pretty standard stuff, you should always go with a foldable one because it will just make your life much easier. This does have a micro SD slot as well as a downward facing camera for optical flow positioning. It does also have a landing light you'll see beneath as well that can be turned on and off using the controller, and there's a button on the back which can be used of course to power the drone on and off, and you get your classic MJX chime that you'll be used to if you've used any of their products before. This drone does also support GPS, and it has a motorized camera that can be adjusted a full 180 degrees up and down on the front. As always, you can pick this drone up in 1, 2 or 3 battery versions. I have the version that comes with 2 batteries, and they do have quite a decent size of 3,400 milliamp hours, which should supposedly give us about a 23-minute flight time, which of course I'll be testing and letting you know how long I get in the flight test. It also comes with a dual charger. Now I'm not sure if this comes with all versions, but I imagine it would. But I will need to double check that. If you leave a comment down below, I will come back to you. And it's always nice to have these dual chargers because it just makes the charging experience that little bit more user friendly. It works by charging one battery and it then cuts off the current to that one and starts charging the second. There was something that was a little strange, however. You'll notice that the charger uses a USB-C cable, but the cable that comes with this product is a micro USB, leaving me slightly confused. I'm not sure if this is a mistake or there was supposed to be some sort of adapter that should be included, but luckily I have USB-C cables lying around, so that wasn't a problem for me. Let's move on to the controller, and you'll see it shares the same look, if a little bit boring. It does feel quite well designed and sturdy. It takes 3 AAA batteries on the back using this little compartment that can be removed by hand. I did find this compartment doesn't feel very secure and like it could open quite easily, so a bit of a thumbs down for that. We have your typical phone holder that's been used in quite a few MJX products now, and I do quite like this design. It works well. Probably won't be great for really big phones, but for most phones it is perfectly fine. As we move on to the flight test, I want to mention the app quickly. So while the app didn't give me any issues, I noticed this one is using a slightly different app to some of the other MJX products that I've used, and I did prefer this one a little bit less. As I say, there wasn't really any major issues. I just didn't prefer the layout as much and the user friendliness of the UI, but as I say, this was just a personal preference. Other than that, it performed absolutely fine. Getting the drone flight ready and taking it off was pretty straightforward. This app didn't guide me through that process as well as some others I've used, but it was pretty painless to get going. I also need to say it was very windy on this flight test, which kind of gives this drone a bit of a hard time in keeping itself stable, as you'll see. And also I had to remove pretty much all of the audio, so sorry you can't hear what the drone sounds like, but I will try and include a couple of clips that have some audio so you can hear that, but just bear in mind there will probably be some annoying wind noise as well. So initially when I took it off, I did my first test, which is just to let the drone hover and take my hands off of the controls. It held its position very well, but one problem I did notice, which I had quite a few times throughout my test is it did seem to have a trouble holding its altitude and would sometimes dip down lower to the ground. This wasn't a huge issue, it was something that happened maybe 10 to 20% of the time and didn't really sort of cause me any major problems to the point where the drone would crash, but I just noticed it didn't hold its height as well as some other drones that I've used before. Another area that I often pay close attention to when reviewing a GPS drone is its manual control input. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, most GPS drones have a tendency to really lock you into place and ignore sort of your manual control input to a certain extent, kind of putting a buffer in place, so a delay between your control input and the drone moving, and a aggressiveness to stabilize the drone and hold its position. Now, what this can sometimes do is make you feel like you don't have full control of the drone, and it can make the drone feel quite floaty at times as well. Now, while of course it's understandable that a drone would do this to help you get stable camera shots, the drones that are often the best are the ones that give you this great stability, but when you give the drone control input, it really does what you want it to do and give you response and prompt responses to your input. Now, this drone just felt quite sluggish at times, and its pitch and yaw speed just felt quite low even when I had it on the high settings, so I did find it quite frustrating to fly. Now, I am bearing in mind the wind here, which made my flying experience a little bit worse, but even when the wind died down at times, I still felt the drone just had a bit of a delay in my inputs and felt quite slow at times, again even on the high rates. There was another issue that I experienced a handful of times also. I'm not sure if this was some sort of connection issue, but the drone was quite far away from me, and when I tried to maneuver the drone, it almost felt like the control input had been reduced to maybe 10% of the speed, so I couldn't really move the drone to fight the wind, and it felt almost like the drone was locked in place. Both times this happened, I changed the yaw speed to low and then back to high, and it seemed to fix this problem. I'm not sure if there was some other mode I wasn't aware of that I was putting the drone into, but this just seemed to happen by itself on 2 occasions, which was a little bit unnerving. When it did happen, I just hit the return to home button just to be safe, and I didn't have any issues. I did notice the drone, when returning to home, doesn't turn around and face you. You can see it's flying in reverse back towards my position. It's a small detail, but I do prefer the drone to turn so you can see the direction it's heading and where you're going towards. Maybe this is something I could have adjusted in the settings, but I'm not sure. Considering the high wind though, I was quite impressed on how promptly the drone returned to me. It returned very close to my takeoff location, and I didn't have any real issues with the return to home function, besides the small detail I mentioned with it flying backwards, which I suppose is kind of cool depending how you look at it. That's not too bad. And on to the part that probably won't surprise you if you've watched quite a few of my videos already, and that's the smart features in this drone performed pretty average at best, and this is not something that surprised me, as unless a drone is using some sort of smart tracking to visually track you, GPS is not often reliable enough depending on the area you're in, the connections you have, and a few other things. So here it performed kind of okay, and the first time I used it, it didn't really track me very well. It kind of moved and sort of faced me, but I had to adjust it manually myself. The second time I tried it, it worked a little bit better, but as you're not using any visual tracking, the camera doesn't really have any way of maneuvering itself onto you and tracking you properly. So this is only using a basic follow me function using the GPS on your smartphone and your drone to kind of orientate the drone to your position, so it doesn't really work great in most situations. Before we take a look at some camera samples, I want to talk about the camera, and we'll take a look at an example in the feed here. Now obviously, because this is such a windy day, this is going to multiply this problem to if you was flying on a calm day. Now because this camera doesn't have a gimbal, it does have some dampening to maybe reduce shake a little bit, but you'll see from the feed it is really struggling to get really any stable shot. It doesn't have optical or electronic image stabilization, so your footage is generally going to be really shaky unless you hold the drone's position and you have virtually no wind. Then maybe you'll get yourself some stable shots. Now I would normally give a drone a pass under specific circumstances. For example, when I reviewed the MJX Bugs B7, some people said that I should have criticized the fact that it didn't have a gimbal, but the reason I gave that drone a pass was because it was targeting a sub 259 gram category, so they did have to think about weight and some other issues as well. This drone is larger and it's not really that cheap, so I would expect it to have a gimbal, and it doesn't, so it puts this drone in kind of a weird place because it's not really targeting anything specific, and the camera isn't really too great, and when we look at the camera example you'll see it only gets worse. So I don't really feel this drone fits into a good category. The fact that it's not really trying to be a small drone, it's not trying to be a large drone, and it doesn't really have a great camera either, so I just feel it sits in a bit of a weird place. Moving on to some camera samples, let's start off with some pictures. I was quite disappointed with the pictures in particular. I was hoping they would be stronger than the video, but they're quite washed out in general. They look really smooth and almost blocky, so camera didn't perform very well in terms of photos. The video I feel does perform a bit better under the right conditions and lighting. You'll see that the quality varies quite a bit depending where the camera is facing, how much light there is, and so on. But I think on a brighter day I probably would have been able to get some better shots, so that is worth considering, and maybe it's good to check out some other reviews as well just to see how the camera performs in a different light environment. And that brings us to the end of this review. I think I'm going to wrap it up here as this video is getting quite long. So my final thoughts on this product are a little bit mixed. I don't really feel it fits into one particular area of the market, and I don't really think it targets any one feature that stands out well. It just overall performs okay and does have a few minor issues, so I don't really feel I can recommend this to anyone or anyone looking for a particular feature. If you are quite set on picking it up, I wouldn't heavily discourage you and say it's a bad product, because it's not, but I just feel there are some better options out there, so I would do your research and look around a little bit more. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing for more videos like this one, and of course I will see you in the next one.